Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Damien Goodfellow's graphic novel, Black 47, a story of Ireland's Great Famine. So, many of you will know that the Great Famine or the Great Hunger was one of the most detrimental periods of Irish history. From 1845 through 1847, there was a series of failures of the primary crop that supported the population of Ireland, especially the Gaelic population, the Celtic population of the indigenous Irish, as opposed to the Anglo-Irish landlords, and to a lesser extent, as opposed to the Scots-Irish, who primarily resided in Ulster, and still do, in what's now Northern Ireland. The blight was a disease that attacked potatoes, and potatoes were the primary food of the vast majority of the common people of Ireland. I've heard from an Irish historian that the average adult Irish man in the 1840s would eat like 12 pounds of potatoes per day. So that's an insane amount of potatoes. And if that's the almost exclusive food of the vast majority of your population, and suddenly that is largely wiped out by a disease that destroys massive portions of that crop, that is detrimental. And there was a number of reasons why that food was not easy to replace, even though there were options available. One of which is actually specifically mentioned in the graphic novel. So the graphic novel follows Jack Tarpey and his sister Florence, along with their mother, who does die of pneumonia on the ship crossing from Liverpool to New York, and to an even lesser extent, their father, who is hanged pretty early on as a member of an insurrection, even though he was not actually involved. Jack was actually involved. So I'll go ahead and just summarize this episode now. So Jack gets recruited into a group of Irish rebels who are planning to take up arms against the British establishment and the Anglo-Irish landlord aristocracy. So these would be people who typically were of English descent, Anglo-Norman type descent, and their ancestors had come to Ireland and established feudal dominance over a particular area, and they remained into the 19th and even into the 20th centuries as the landowners who controlled the native Irish peasantry, exploited their labor, etc., etc. The landlord for the Tarpeys is a man named Smythe. And Jack is recruited into a cell of Irish liberation rebels who attack Smythe's house to seize a stockpile of guns that he has, that he's been collecting up. Smythe is killed, but before he is killed, he says the name Tarpey, and so the soldiers who have come to investigate and to round up and execute the rebels assume that this means Jack's father, and so they take him and they hang him, even though there's no trial, there's no evidence, beyond Smythe in his dying moments saying the last name Tarpey. That was British justice in the colonies, not just in Ireland, but in other colonies as well. India, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Jamaica, etc., etc. But Jack, his sister Florence, and their mother managed to make it to Liverpool because while Jack is in Smythe's house during this raid, he gets the tickets that Smythe had tried to basically buy them out of their farm with, because Smythe had paid for third-class accommodations to go to New York, and Jack's dad refused to take it because he refused to leave Ireland, despite the fact that there was no opportunity, and it was clear that things were not working out for the family. So they're on their way. The dad has already been hanged. Jack, Florence, and their mom are on their way. They make it to Dublin, which, interestingly enough, is called, in the thing, Dublin, the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. But Dublin wasn't the crown and the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. That was India. So that's an interesting thing. I don't know why Goodfellow put that in there. But Dublin was an incredibly important point in the British Empire because, as this boatman says, "See that boy? That's the reason the country is starving to death. All that food is being shipped to England and Europe. Them that own the land will have their profits. No poor person will grow old in this country." So that's right there. And that was actually a huge problem in Ireland during the famine, was that the country itself was producing large amounts of food, but most of it was being sent abroad because, A, there was not a market for the British and the Anglo-Irish landlords to make profit off it selling it in Ireland. B, Ireland was part of the British colonial system, and so what that meant was that resources were extracted from the colony in the same way that sugar, coffee, etc., were extracted from Caribbean colonies, and cotton and other spices, other natural resources were extracted from India. Resources were extracted from the African colonies. Oil was extracted from Middle Eastern colonies, etc., etc. That was their purpose within the schema of the British Empire. And so massive amounts of food were exported from Ireland, even as millions of people starved. And as hundreds of thousands, probably, I don't know the exact numbers, but tens of thousands at least during the 1840s alone, emigrated from Ireland to the United States, to Canada, to Australia, to some extent New Zealand, sometimes to other places around the British Empire. I mean, it was an absolute disaster for the Irish people, but within the framework of the British Empire, Ireland continued producing the raw materials that were to be exported abroad for profitable sale by the British. So they make it to Dublin, and from there they get a ship to Liverpool. From Liverpool, they sail for New York. On that voyage, which is a fairly hellacious one, their mother dies of pneumonia and is buried at sea. Then cholera starts spreading among the Irish passengers in third class, down below decks, where Jack and Flora are, or Jack and Florence are. The captain basically orders that third class steerage sealed so that the crew does not mutiny at the threat of being exposed to cholera, and large numbers of people die on this voyage. Like, we don't know how many passengers were on this ship initially, but 10 to 20 per day are dying at some point. And this is a multi-week voyage. So that's going to take a huge toll on the number of people who actually survive to get off at New York. But despite the urgings of a priest, Father Duggan, the captain is unable or unwilling to provide any sort of assistance to the people being ravaged by the cholera outbreak, in part because during a storm, the supplies for the crew itself have been severely damaged, and so there isn't much fresh water to distribute. Jack and Florence end up making it to New York. Jack is severely ill, and Father Duggan brings him and Florence to some nuns who take care of him, basically, sort of hospital type situation. They each have their heads shaved to get rid of lice, but they both survive. In the end, the last portion, Florence is basically saying, "Wait till you see New York. When you are fit, we'll go into the city together. Every man here speaks a different language. You will love it here. It's very, very different to Ireland." And so we get this sort of this image of the port of New York, I suppose, but then the streets of New York, where we get these sort of wide range of different types of people, right? We got this this organ grinder with his monkey, probably Italian or something like this. We've got these people who seem to be Chinese based on their clothing. This person, based on their skin tone, is possibly African American. Yeah, so we got a wide range of different people here that we're seeing. Now, one of the things, so I've done videos about at least one of Goodfellow's other graphic novels. He's very, very interested in history. He's not quite as good at character development, and that definitely is something that shows up in Black 47 as well. That would be my main critique of this graphic novel. We get a little bit of character development, characterization with Jack, but the characters are mostly fairly flat, fairly one-dimensional. They're not super, super interesting. It's really more about sort of taking a tour through this period of history and seeing the kinds of challenges being faced, the strategies that people use to survive, etc., etc. That seems to be what Goodfellow's really interested in and what he's really good at. So, yeah. It's this horrific period of Irish history, and Goodfellow makes it accessible in graphic novel format.